And now the waiting part.
I love the waiting part. It's my favorite.
Not showing.
All right. According to YouTube, we are live. So welcome back, everybody. I am David Farkas. I'm joined by Josh Lehrer, and this is another episode of Red Dot Forum Camera Talk. We are also joined by Jose Rivera, who's producing the show and working the cameras, feeding us questions.
Hello, everybody.
And also we've got the usual suspects, Kirsten Vignes and Peter Dooling, hanging out in the comments. So they might be helping you guys there. If you have any questions, they can answer, send links, what have you. But today we are continuing on this is now the third episode in our Leica M series, Leica M lens series, I should say. So what are we talking about today?
Well, today we have an entire episode devoted to the 35mm focal length. So everything you see on this table right now, and the things you can't see that are cropped, are, believe it or not, all 35mm focal length lenses. And there's not one duplication. So there's some variance, but there's no duplication. So this is the most amount of 35mm lenses I've seen in one place. I think David would agree to that. Maybe outside of the Leica factory. So we're going to cover the versions and the looks and the techniques and the thoughts and any questions that you guys have about 35mm lenses.
Yeah.
Our next episode will be on 50mm lenses, so keep the 50 questions for the next one. Just
right.
FYI, we did wide and we did long. Now we're doing 35 and then we're doing 50, and then who knows what's next.
Yep. So if you're interested in that and you want to learn about, say, wide-angle M lenses, anything wider than 35, we covered that 2 episodes ago, and our last episode was telephotos. So anything longer than 50.
Yes.
And so all that is there for the taking. And if you're interested, let's say, in the M system in general, we actually did 2 episodes on the M10 and M system in general.
Our first 2 episodes.
First 2 episodes, 2 parts, and then we did a whole nother episode dedicated to the M monochrome.
Yes, so we have a lot of M content, which makes sense since the M system is kind of the core of what it means to be Leica. And the 35mm lens, although they didn't start that way, is kind of the core of, I would say it's probably the most popular focal length to start with, at least what I see. When people ask me, Josh, if I could just get one. In fact, we've answered this. If we could just have one lens, we both would take a 35. Yeah. So it's a lens that can do a lot of things. And in a situation where you really can't bring more lenses, I think a 35mm lens is, what do you call it, your desert island lens?
Yeah, I call it my desert island lens. And I think that's a good question to lead off on.
Sure.
Which is, and something, you get this question, I get this question.
Sure.
What makes a 35 so flexible? And now I think we should both take a crack at it.
You want me to go first?
You go first.
Well, I think a 35 is the perfect balance between long enough to have people in the frame without them being distorted or having like giant noses, but wide enough that it's a lens that shoots what you see, in the sense that as you're walking around, you can see something and shoot it. Seems simple, but it's not taking a slice of what you see. It's sort of getting that. So it can do a lot, especially now that we've got high resolution sensors for 47 megapixel on the SL2. It's even more flexible.
Sure.
Because now I have a little bit of crop wiggle room, more so than ever. So if I decide, I wish it was a little tighter,
you can get there.
I don't do that a lot, but it's nice to have that option.
Absolutely.
Your turn.
Similar. I think for me.
I stole your answer. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So for me, I think, and I have to admit, and I'll probably admit this in our next episode, but I started out as a 50mm shooter. That was the first lens that I had with my serious camera. I had a 50mm f2, and my dad, who kind of taught me photography, when I said I want this lens and I want that lens, he's like, learn how to use that one first. Yeah. Once you learn how to master 50mm, then we can talk. Then you can think about other lenses. Yeah. So for the longest time, I just saw everything in 50mm, and it wasn't until something happened. Right? It must have been like an industrial accident or something.
That's right. Chemical spill, I think.
Chemical spill, bit by a spider or something. Yeah. And I tried out a 35. Actually was with the original M9 monochrome. Nice. And I took a quick trip to New York City, and I was like, there's a lot of people talking about 35. I'm going to try this 35. Yeah. And I put 35 1.4 on the monochrome.
And this was not the current version. This would have been the. No, this would have been.
It was the FLE. Yeah.
FLE. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm thinking.
Now I had plenty of experience with the 35,
Right.
but not as a 35 because I used the 35 Cron and the 35 Lux pre-FLE, and then FLE on the M8 and M8.2. But once the M9 came out, 50 Lux.
That's right.
Right. So I made that shift
because the M8 had a crop sensor. For
exactly.
those who don't know, 1.3. So a 35 basically became
was my 50.
A 50. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That being said, on a full frame camera, the monochrome, I took that 35, and I went to New York City, and I fell in love. I fell in love with the lens. It gave me something extra than the 50, right?
I mean, I remember the pictures you took.
Yeah.
I was here.
Right,
I remember you came to New York, and you came back and all those amazing shots you did in your original monochrome review.
Yeah.
That was what, 2010?
Something. 2012.
2012? Right, 3 years. Yeah, 2012. So 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's kind of exploded ever since. I mean, now we're spoiled with a lot of options, and you start to go into Leica's back catalog, because these are all M-mount lenses, pretty much. You have access to a pretty wide swath of options in 35. Different apertures, different sizes, different looks, different everything. Collectible lenses, special editions, regular ones, brass, aluminum. Yeah. It's insane. It's insane. And we're going to cover a lot of that because we've got so much. And certainly, I probably won't be able to talk about every lens in this table, but if somebody who's watching sees something that I don't talk about, just holler and be like, what's that? And I'll grab it and we'll talk about it.
We'll take it and we'll just hide it.
That's right, because it can be so easy to get carried away. If you watched our shows before, we go 2 hours talking about, a particular focus tab, and it's nonstop. So I think we can probably start answering some questions.
Yeah, look, that's our love letter to 35.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It really is
very flexible,
yes.
Very versatile.
And this, I think, holds true on the other systems we use, especially SL, the 35 Apple SL, which we talked about in the SL video. Even on the S, David loves the 45, which is equivalent to a 35. So if you watch the S video, so this all holds true regardless of if we have an M or an SL or an S or whatever we may be using.
That through line kind of goes through there in terms of equivalent focal length.
Yeah.
And I guess just to kind of summarize, right?
Yes.
What you said, absolutely correct. I think most people kind of split down the middle of some people see 35, some people see 50.
Or 28.
No, nobody sees 28.
I know someone who sees 28. I used to see 28 for a long time.
Wow, maybe without my glasses on. I could see 28.
You can get the frameless ones like I have.
Right. I have frames, so 35.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But basically, having something that it doesn't render like a wide-angle lens, but it gives you a little bit more than the 50.
Yeah.
You still don't have any kind of distortion. It still gives you something extra, right? But it definitely makes it feel like you're more of a participant in the images than an observer.
I think
so. That's my take.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's the reason 35, well, it's one of the many reasons 35 is just a go-to focal length.
It's really versatile.
Extremely versatile. And on that note, let's
get some questions.
Let's get some questions because we were rambling. Jose.
All right, let's get started. First question. Besides aperture, what should I consider when deciding among 35mm lenses?
Oh, that's a good question. You want to take this one? Or why don't we take this one? We can both answer it.
Well, let me address what you're not asking about, which is aperture. I think that I just want to address. I want to address that first.
All right, go to town.
Because aperture is a little less important now with cameras like the M10 and the M10 monochrome that you can shoot at 32,000, 64,000. No, 32. Sorry, I'm thinking monochrome. 3,200, 6,400, 10,000 on the M10, and and up to 20,000, 32,000 ISO on the M10 monochrome. So I guess to answer your question, you don't have to really be as concerned with aperture when it comes to having enough light coming into the lens to get a steady shot, because you now have this variable that we've been really limited by up until just recently. So
there's a dog here.
There is a big dog right here. So
keep talking.
So in film world, I know people have different levels of tolerance for film grain, but myself, I really would rarely shoot over 400 ISO film. And in the early days of digital, I probably wouldn't have shot more than 400 ISO on the first cameras. The M8 was like 640 was okay. On the M9, we're getting up to like 800, 1,000.
Everyone's telling you to speed it up. Go faster.
But today we have these cameras that can shoot at insanely high ISO relative to where we were just 10 years ago.
Yes.
So you don't have to think about the aperture in terms of exposure and getting the proper exposure and a shake-free exposure. But where aperture comes in to play is managing depth of field as a creative tool. So, and I'm sure Josh might agree with me, the reason to go with, say, a Summilux 1.4 over a Summicron f2 or a Summer at 2.4 or 2.5 is to get more subject background isolation. Especially because it's a slight wide angle, more so than a 50, you need a little bit wider aperture to have that same separation that you would, let's say, a 35-1.4 versus a 50 f2 would be roughly equivalent.
Right.
That being said, I think that, at least my view is all of the modern 35s are very, very good. So really, why you would choose the apertures is for creative purposes. And I'm gonna let.
Yeah, he wants love from you now.
I'm sorry. There's a dog right here getting pets right now, so I'm gonna let Josh take the.
Well, I'd like to actually answer the question, which was aside from aperture. I mean, budget's a big one, right? Not everybody is gonna spend $5,000 or more on a 35-1.4 floating element. So that's the first question, right? What's your budget? Question 2: do you want modern or do you want retro? Okay, buddy, he's bouncing around. Or do you want vintage? Or I'd say modern, or so 1 generation old or 5 generations old. So, because depending on the camera you're using, the look you're trying to go for, and what you may already have, that's going to dictate if you want something modern or vintage. So, size, right? 35 Summer at 2.4 is a heck of a lot smaller than a 35 Summilux of any variant, and also lighter. Now, it's not like the difference is dramatic overall, but as a percentage, especially if you're trying to pare down your kit, that makes a difference. So, budget, size requirement, and if you want something modern or vintage, to me is what you would just be the factors. That was a much shorter answer than yours, which is fine. It was a good answer though. It was insightful. I appreciate it. But let's keep momentum going before we
What do you got, Jose?
All right. What is the sharpest 35mm corner to corner?
Okay, now I'm gonna let you take that because in case you're just joining us for the first Red Dot Forum Camera Talk.
Yes.
If you've watched any of our other episodes on lenses for any system, Josh takes every single one of these lenses.
Yes.
And he puts them on a tripod, well, on a camera, on a tripod, and shoots test subjects that are super, super boring and laborious and mind-numbing. Yes. But he actually has the answer to this.
Yes.
Because
But it's an easy answer in this case.
And if you didn't catch this, I want to just reiterate.
Yes.
Every single 35mm focal length lens in M mount that Leica has ever made is on this table right now. Every single version.
Yes. Yeah, we literally. We have I have a list.
One of everything.
And we have one of everything. So I was able to test one of everything to get some insight into how these lenses work. Because sure, we've shot them over the years, but to shoot them all in a row is both, I don't think it's mind-numbing. I enjoyed it. I'm a huge nerd like that. It's fun for me. The short answer is the one everyone knows. The 35 Summilux FLE. The modern version. It's not a mystery for sure. I have my own short rambling with David version of a story about this lens, which is when this lens came out in 2010, it was extremely hard to get. The wait list was through the roof. It was crazy. So David and I really didn't have a chance to shoot it that much. Now, the M9 Titanium came out around the same time, which featured the 35-1.4 FLE in it. So I had the chance to use the M9 Titanium, and that was actually the first time I used the 35-1.4 FLE because it came with it. Right, so it was kind of a weird way of introducing myself to that lens. The first picture I took, which was actually downstairs in this building with that combo, I looked at the screen and I said to David or whoever was with me, "Oh, did they change the screen as well on the M9 Titanium? Because I thought they put a higher res screen on it than the M9 because the image looks so good." And I realized that no, it was the same screen, but you could see even on the 230,000 pixel M9 screen, which was not so great, you could see the difference on that screen, and I saw it immediately. It wasn't even that I knew the lens was great or anything. I had no bias. I just saw the picture, and from then on, that moment has ingrained itself in my head. And anytime that I put that lens on the camera, whether it be the M10 monochrome, the SL2, M10 CL, whatever, I know that I'm getting the absolute best performance from an M35mm lens. Now, its predecessor, the 35-1.4 Aspheric non-FLE, is nearly as good. They didn't really change the optical design much. They just added the floating element. But it's not quite as good, especially wide open, especially at close focus, which is where, of course, the floating element, and there it is. So this is the 35-1.4 Aspheric, or we could call it a version 1 Aspheric. I mean, there's 50 different ways to describe this lens. The easiest way to identify it is it has a clip-on. Let me take the cap off here. Or not a clip-on, like a
It's a strange rotating.
Yeah, weird collar mechanism plastic lens hood, whereas the FLE, I got it here, has a metal threaded hood. So this is the first version of the Aspheric, or the ASPH, if you want to get real specific. And this is the current version, we'll call it the FLE. So you can see very similar, not dramatically different, but this is the older one and this is the newer one. Again, you can see the hood difference as well. So I think the FLE is truly a gift that Leica bestowed upon us, and I'm grateful for it, and it is the sharpest lens.
Yeah, now I can just briefly, briefly
Wanna
speak
listen.
about the pre-FLE, because I did use this one pretty
Yes.
extensively in my M8 days, right? The reason that Leica introduced an FLE, just in case
This is a question that's on the list, but you can answer it.
I'm going to answer it. FLE stands for floating lensed element, which is a pretty revolutionary idea at this time. They got inspiration from the 50 millimeter Summilux Aspheric. Now, FLE is not in the name of that lens like it is here.
No, well, it's actually not in the name of this lens either.
It's not, right. We just colloquially refer to it.
We should make that clear that to differentiate between two lenses that are both called 35 or Summilux M and 35 millimeter f1.4 ASPH, same name. Yes, they have different Leica catalog numbers, but we colloquially call the new one the FLE or the FLE, some people call it.
But it's not in the title.
It's not on the name, it's not on the box, it's not on the lens, it's nowhere. So just beware of that.
Stop looking for it.
So don't but it's the current version, and we're going to call it the FLE for
Right. And the 50 millimeter Summilux, which we'll talk about in our next episode, introduced a floating lens element. The 75 Summicron, Apple Summicron M, also has a floating lens element. You can look at our last episode. What that does is it corrects for focus variance over, from near focus to infinity. Traditional lens design, let's say in a non-floating lens element design, what's called a total focusing system. That means that the optical designers have to optimize it for a set distance. And they have to say, okay, it's going to perform perfectly at infinity, or perfectly at close focus, or perfectly at 3 meters, whatever that number is, which I know people have theorized the world over, or used to be, and that different manufacturers, be it Leica would do it at a certain distance, and Zeiss would do it at another distance, and everyone had these different approaches. Leica's approach now is a lot of the lenses are floating lens element designs, and they're optimized for every distance. So when Josh was talking about that sharpness, because maybe you could achieve that sharpness with the pre-FLE lens at a certain distance, but not all distances. And the other place where this lens was replaced and was because it exhibited a certain amount of aperture-related focus shift.
And it varied from copy to copy.
And it did.
They're not all. This one's fine. I tested it because I was curious.
Right, and I don't want to harp on this, but it was definitely a thing.
A known issue,
It was a known thing. Because when this lens was designed in the mid-90s, it was for film, and film has a certain depth to it in terms of its actual composition. So any kind of a focus shift, and when I say aperture-related focus shift, it means that where you might be sharp at 1.4, if you stop down to f2, the focus would shift backwards.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, enough to make a soft
And on
picture.
film, it would be fine.
Yeah.
But digital, because it's this rigid plane, and it either hits it or it doesn't, you noticed it. And a lot of users noticed, and they said something's off, because wide open, it's spot on. F2, it's soft. 2.8, it's a little less soft, and then by f4, it's fine. Yeah. Kind of had this dip. The FLE fixed that completely. If you have a pre-aspheric, an aspheric pre-FLE, the workaround is to have Leica calibrate it to be slightly front-focused wide open. And then that would carry through and be properly focused the rest of the way.
Now, I should mention that on a live view camera, that's irrelevant.
True,
because
like
you're
the SL.
looking, right, if you use the 35-1.4 pre-FLE on the SL or SL2, focus shift isn't an issue because you're looking through the lens and focusing in real time.
Off the sensor.
Right. If as opposed to a rangefinder, which requires an inherent calibration that is not looking through the lens, so it's calibrated at a fixed point.
Right. So you might find that the pre-FLE lens, if you're planning on using it on an SL, SL2, CL, TL2,
Yeah.
there really won't be that much of a difference between the two generations of lenses.
With regard to image quality specifically.
Right.
There are some differences from my testing, but not dramatic. Of course, what I really discovered is the build quality difference is where you really get your money's worth. Between the redesigned barrel and the redesigned hood,
the hood,
and this better focusing mechanism and aperture adjustment mechanism, and all the things that they've learned making lenses in the past 15 years, 20 years. So what's cool about the Aspheric pre-FLE is there was a couple of cool additions of it. I'm going to show one here. Now the standard version is aluminum barrel, and they made two other sort of serial reproduction versions, one in silver chrome and one in what they call their titanium finish. Not made of titanium, just sort of named because of the color.
Titanium look.
This is a 3514 Aspheric pre-FLE in titanium. Let me take the cap off.
Ooh.
Really cool. It's brass. It's quite heavy, really solid. I'm just showing this off because this lens is absolutely gorgeous. I love the titanium finish. I wish they would do it more. They don't do it a lot in the modern era. At least not that I can think of, a titanium Q. But anyway, this is the same version as it just doesn't have the hood. This is the lens in black, the sort of most common one, and this is the titanium one. And they made this in silver chrome as well. So you had a couple of cool variants to choose from. And I think the silver ones are actually sometimes rarer than the titanium ones, but they're both quite rare to see. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Definitely.
Let's get to the next question before I go.
I was taking a quick look there, and I think one we can answer pretty quickly.
Sure.
Someone said, is there a 35 Summicron FLE?
No.
No.
Only the Lux. But even that slight difference between 1.4 and f2 is a big difference in terms of the demands that it puts on the light coming through. So I haven't noticed any issues of focus shift with any of the Summicrons.
I haven't either.
So I guess it's just not a non-issue, thankfully, at least in my experience. So that's a good question.
They did redesign and tweak the 35 Summicron. There is a version 2 of it.
Or really a version 6.
Well, I mean,
version 2 Aspheric, yeah.
Version 2 Aspheric.
It gets a little crazy with these version numbers.
We'll go over that, but
later,
but basically, it didn't need to have a floating element as part of that optical tweak. Mainly, it was the number of aperture blades introduced to get smoother bokeh.
Yeah, there you go.
But
all right,
figured I'd knock that one out pretty fast.
Yeah, let's go to another question. What do we got?
So that's on the same topic of the bokeh. Hans is asking, which one has the best bokeh, latest Summicron or Summilux FLE?
Well, I don't know how to define.
Better.
Okay, so bokeh is inherently which describes the out of focus area of a picture. Okay, if we're going to get to and some people call it bokeh, and someone's going to say I'm saying it wrong, which is fine. Whatever it is, the out of focus area. I don't know how to say which one is best because it's very subjective.
It is.
Some people like it to be really swirly and jittery and broken up with, ill-defined shapes, and some people like a bokeh that's smooth transitions and very amorphous shapes. It really depends, and every one of these lenses on this table renders the out-of-focus area differently, not only in terms of how it looks, but also how quickly the focus falls off. Not all f2s are created equal, for example. Mm-hmm. Some f2s may have a softer or a more out-of-focus background than others. So I don't know. I mean, I happen to like the bokeh of the modern version. I do find that the version, let me just make sure I get this right, version 4, which is the Bokeh King, is whatever. We'll get to that later. But I think the version 5, which replaced it, meaning the previous version 35 Summicron, is actually quite nice. But I honestly always defer to the FLE because that bokeh is super creamy, very smooth. It's not jittery. It's not really broken up. It's, there's no coma on the corners. It's just really, really clean. Mm-hmm. It's a clean bokeh. You can see I'll start using these really flowery words to describe it because it's more like art than science. Yes, it really is. Yeah. So I would never be presumptuous enough to say this has the best bokeh. It's just maybe what I like.
Well, I think the more accurate way to say it is, it's the best bokeh in Josh's eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the best bokeh in my eyes.
Yeah.
Or the best bokeh in your eyes.
Yeah.
And that's actually, maybe to come full circle back to our earlier question, maybe that should be a deciding factor for you in terms of which 35 you get.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, it's not about what's the sharpest lens. It's about what gives them the look that they want.
Right.
And that's kind of the beauty here is with all of these choices, every single one of these 35s draws differently.
Yes.
And it has a very different character and very different look. This is not a just, pick one out of a case and they're all the same.
Right.
They're actually all very different.
Yeah, dramatically different in some cases, which is pretty amazing when you put them all together and you start to see over 6 generations of Summicron, for example, how far they've come, especially on a high-res camera like the SL2, even the M10, which is only 24 megs, right? So I would say that when it comes to bokeh, as David said, it is very personal. There's a lot of samples out there. I have samples that I can share. If someone wants to see some boring pictures of the store that I shot. But I can have fun with any of these lenses wide open because I know what each of them is going to do. And if I'm looking for a certain look, especially if I'm shooting black and white, where the bokeh becomes more important because color is no longer a variable, I'm thinking differently. So yeah, that was kind of a non-answer, I guess, but it's a tricky question to answer. So
well, it's not scientific.
Let's get on to the next one.
We don't have a scientific answer.
Before I get too hung up on this one, what?
Well, did someone ask what's the sharpest one? Which we answered, right?
We answered that, yeah.
Okay.
The FLE, yeah.
Because that's easier to answer.
Oh, yeah.
Sharpness is a lot easier to answer than what's the best bokeh.
Right.
We can define sharpness. You could say this clearly resolves more information in the center. You could look at corner performance.
Sure,
okay,
sure.
This is better in the corners, quantitatively. But bokeh is very, very subjective. I mean, I think we really need to hit that home in that there is no best here.
Yeah. There's certainly a most expensive, but there's no best, in my mind anyway, because you can have so much fun.
Especially, I think, especially with 35.
Yeah.
It's not, with longer lenses, it's a lot easier to get softer, creamier, out of focus areas, right? Let's take a 90 Summilux or a 75 Noctilux, for example.
Yeah.
They have the best bokeh. Probably. I mean, if you're looking for creamy, smooth,
whatever. 75 Noctilux especially, that is incredible,
35, because of its nature, I guess it's never going to look like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you should be after that because it's a different lens. 35 is a different use case.
You don't use it for that. No. You don't use it for that crazy. Although with the very, very early version of the Summilux, you get some pretty wild stuff. Now, I wouldn't say it's super usable for every day, but what I'll say too is I could find a use case for every lens on this table. I mean, if I had infinite budget and infinite time to do whatever I wanted, I could own all these lenses and I could use them all. Honestly, I know that's ridiculous to say because
pretty ridiculous.
Even the special editions, because each of them has their place. I'm not saying it's practical, but my point is that when it comes to Leica lenses, and we'll talk about this with the 50 show as well, you can own several 35mm lenses, and just because of the same focal length, don't be fooled, they're actually quite different. And you're going to go out and shoot differently, see differently, and the images are going to feel different between versions. So
I can get behind that.
Yeah. Next question.
All right. If you're shooting black and white only, would it be necessary to get a modern lens versus a 1990s vintage 35mm?
Well, sure. It depends on your requirements for for contrast, vignetting, bokeh, sharpness.
Lack of sharpness?
Or lack of sharpness and usability. Certainly, the color rendering of the lens is irrelevant with a monochrome camera. That's really the only thing that...
But the contrast.
Yeah.
The contrast, the micro contrast, the sharpness. And, a lot of people... It kind of falls into two camps here, and people in the middle, right? There's a gamut, I would say, looking for absolute sharpest, best, I'm going to use that in quotes again, best performance, and let's say that's the 35 Summilux Aspheric FLE, the modern one. And clearly, I have used it on the M10 monochrome, which at 40 some odd pixels, 40.89, it does definitely put a higher demand on the lenses in terms of what they need to do resolving power-wise. So I'd say the 35 modern 35 does a trick.
Yeah.
But I would also say that if you don't need that aperture, again, because you can shoot at 20, 30,000 ISO, you can use a Summerit, and it's going to be plenty sharp.
Sure.
Okay, that being said, when we start to go to the older lenses, you may want specifically to have something that has more character to it, that has more of a vintage look, because then you're able to kind of balance that absolute performance from a monochrome with that classic look that you might have when you shot Tri-X in an M3.
Right.
You know, and being able to have that version 4 Bokeh King look, or even you want to really like, you know, get glowy kind of stuff. You know, you can go further back. You can go to an early Summicron or early Summilux,
Or a Sumaron if you want.
or even a Sumaron if you really want to get glowy.
Yeah.
Because that might be the look you're after.
Sure.
It's a lot easier to get that look in camera using a lens than it is to try to replicate it in post-processing.
It's you would agonize over a file forever to try to replicate the look, and you never will truly get it. Whereas you can pop the lens on and it changes. You go out one day with a FLE, you go out the next day with a Cron version 1, and it's like two different everything. I mean, it's two different mindsets, really. So with the monochrome, whether it's an M monochrome or a black and white film, the things you think about change a little bit with regards to lens choice, but the basic requirements of sharpness and contrast are still going to be there, or whatever you need. So, yeah.
And the reason I said lack of is because you might actually want that.
Right.
You might want that vintage look.
What's next?
All right. Can you please explain the hype behind the 35mm Summicron version 4?
I'll let you take that.
So, yeah. So there are 6 versions of the 35 Summicron. That includes the modern one and everything since then. And they're basically every optical. I got it right here. Every optical change is essentially another version. So the current version is version 6. That's the Aspheric. Version 4 was the last one before they went to the Aspheric. So the version 4 was, I'm going to refer to my notes so I don't mess up, 1980 to 1997. So 17 years they made this lens. And it's gotten this name for itself called the Bokeh King because it has 7 lens elements and it renders the out of focus area in a very unique way. What I think is most interesting about it, and I will grab it, which is right here, get a little close-up action. I can move
Maybe raise it up higher to get away from all the other stuff.
Yeah. Let me move the camera up. So the lens is extremely tiny. I'm going to take off the hood and the back cap so you can actually see. Here we go. Thank you. Oh.
It's very compact.
There we go. Extremely small. And I'll answer another question I know we have, which this is the lightest 35mm lens Leica has ever made. I just weighed it. It's 135 grams. There's nothing to this thing. That's specifically the black version. So it has the barrel construction pretty close to a modern lens. So it feels relatively modern while you're using it. And it's actually extremely sharp in the center for a lens from the 80s, right? What did I say, 1980? Yeah. So the lens designed really in the late 70s. It's going to render surprisingly modern. The out of focus area, there's really nothing else like it aside from what I would say maybe the double aspherical, which we'll talk about later. Because it's both smooth but jittery and broken up. So shapes do transition, like big shapes transition very smoothly, and the focus fall off is very fast. So the predecessors 1 through 3, excuse me, the focus fall off is more gradual, so there's not as much out of focus area, not as much bokeh. The version 4 falls off extremely fast, and it gets to that magic very quickly. So like cut right to the chase. What's cool is they also made this lens in silver, here we go, which is extremely rare.
Don't drop it.
I will not. It's got a filter on it, which I'm gonna take off. Hold on. I should have taken this off earlier. And there we go. So, check this out. Let me get the close-up shot again, Jose, please, if we could. This is the, here we go, brass silver chrome version. So brass, these are both Superclod version 4s. The brass versions are extremely rare. This is about 100 grams heavier, if my notes are correct. Yeah, 105 grams heavier, so 240 grams, because it's a brass barrel, not an aluminum one. But man, it is beautiful. This is one of my favorite 35mm lenses, is the silver chrome version 4, because it just looks really cool. It's like kind of squished, almost like something got dropped on it, you know, but it really renders beautifully. These have become great collectible pieces in terms of their value, especially the ones made in Germany. You can see this one is Canadian and the silver one is German. You can't see that, but just trust me. So I would say the size, the fact that it's the only one with 7 elements, or pre-aspheric, the modern, semi-modern barrel design, and the sharp performance with the quick focus fall off make this lens have a cult following. All of those reasons kind of combined, doubly so with the Silverchrome version because they're so rare. I enjoy using it. I tested it on the SL2. I thought it was excellent. I was really impressed with the performance. No, it's not as good as a modern ASPH 35 Summicron. It's not. It's worse. I'm sorry to tell you. But it is fun. And it is very usable. I want to emphasize that point. It's not like using a lens from the 60s or the 70s where it's like very loose and hard to work with and it's got jittery aperture and all this stuff. It really is a very modern lens. You can have it 6-bit coated. Yeah. So Bokeh King version 4, black or silver. If you can find a silver one, get it because they are awesome.
Pretty.
Very pretty and very heavy, 100 grams. So this is 240 grams, 135. Sweet.
Small price to pay for beauty.
That's right. This thing is so sweet. All right. So hopefully that answers your question, whoever asked that. So thank you.
Bokeh King.
Bokeh King, version 4.
There is something to it.
It's where it's at. All right,
Yeah.
put it back now so I don't mix up.
All right, Jose.
What do
While
we got?
Josh is putting a Humpty Dumpty back together, why don't you give us another question?
Let's see. When was the FLE lens introduced?
Not that long ago. So that was actually in 2010, which
Not really. I mean, 10 years is a long time, but it's in the scope of Leica lenses.
yeah, it's pretty
It's actually
recent.
pretty modern, and it just shows you how future-proof that lens was. That here we are sitting 10 years later, waxing poetically about it.
Yeah, and it was unavailable, completely unavailable
man.
for 2 straight years.
Ugh.
I mean,
Yeah.
it actually, in
Those are
my
sad
recollection, was one of the hardest lenses to ever get for Leica. And it wasn't because they weren't making them. They were making them, but they were like gobbled up like that. Just because everyone loves 35-1.4s.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, they've held their value pretty well for used ones, and they've made a couple of special editions and things like that, which we'll get to. So, yeah. Next.
All right. I have a 35mm 1.4. Is the 28mm 1.4 too similar to purchase?
It's pretty different. You've actually
Yeah.
tested that recently. You didn't do a head-to-head versus the 35.
No, but I've shot them both. I mean, the
Right.
28 Lux
It's probably a little sharper, right?
is a little bit sharper. Although it vignettes more, which I think is built in. I think it's purposely because it's like counterintuitive to have a bokeh magical looking 28. It doesn't make sense. They're very different. They are close in focal length, only in the sense as close as a 28 is to a 35. But I could definitely justify having both again, depending on budget. But I don't know if it's. I wouldn't buy a 35-1.4 and then immediately a 28-1.4.
Right.
I'd probably buy something a little farther. And as I'm building my kit, certainly if I'm going to get a 28, the 1.4 is by far the best one Leica makes in a vacuum, right? Budget aside. They make a lot of great 28s. We talked about it in the last episode. But I think they were designed 6 years apart, 5 years apart, and they're very different design-wise. You look at the lens diagrams, they're pretty different. They feel different, they render different. The width of the 28, while still being 1.4, it really feels, I mean, it just looks, I don't know how else to describe it. It's just very different. I don't have a good answer for that. But,
I mean, would you say that the 28 Cron looks more like the 35 Lux?
Yeah, I more so, but again,
it's not exact.
The amount or the amount of depth of field you lose, or the amount of
Gain. You're gaining, yeah.
depth of field you gain when
Right.
bokeh you lose, for going from 35 to 28 is pretty significant.
It is.
So that's really where the difference is wide open. A 28 f2 has a lot more depth of field
Sure.
than a 35 f2
Yeah,
or 1.4.
definitely.
So requirements, your look is going to be much different. It's a good question though. What's next?
Okay, let's see. Okay, so back to the version 4 Summicron real
Okay.
quick. If we're looking to buy a used 35 version 4, how do we know if it's a version 4?
Well,
Okay.
you can use a few things. You can look at it, and it looks very, there's no other lens that looks exactly like it. Because let's get a close up real quick.
You want to show? Why don't we do this? Show a version 3.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. Then version 4, and then version 5.
All right. So this is. Let's see if we can get.
There we go.
Here we go. So they look pretty similar right now, but this is a version 3. This is a version 4. You'll notice that the version 3, here we go, does not say 35 millimeter on it anywhere on the barrel. It's not etched. Where at version 4,
It's right there.
right there. That's one way. That's one giveaway. The front sort of section accommodates a different hood. Like it's hard to see on this here. I'm trying to show that. This is the version 4 right here. But of course, the real difference and the way you're going to tell is by the serial number. Because on the Leica wiki page, which is run by Leica User Forum, you can go there and you can look at every single lens that Leica's ever made, and it gives you the serial number range. So if you're going to buy a version 4, you better know the serial number and have a picture of it.
We can tell them too. We have it here.
Yeah, what's the range for the version 4?
So let's see. We've got So the version 4 serial number started with 297, 4251. So that's just to put it in millions. So like basically anything after 3 million, you're safe.
Yeah, you can also see that the version 3, which is right here, has a pretty thick lens mount because it has the mounting dot on the lens mount, which is something it used to do. Whereas the version 4 has the more like modern mounting dot on the barrel. So there's a couple of giveaways. I mean, the silver band is definitely a big one. The serial number, the mounting dot, the hood style, and the fact that the version 4 has 35 written on it. And they have different product codes as well. I don't think they wrote them on these lenses in this period.
I think it was the one after that.
Yeah, they started doing it after that. So
the version 5 has it.
Never buy any Leica lens, in my opinion, without knowing the serial number. If that's going to allow you to definitively, and you can go back to the wide view today, definitively know which version you're getting, because they're dramatically different, both in performance and price. So you want to make sure you're getting the right one. I know when I list a lens pre-owned that has multiple versions, we put in the title like V4, V3, V5. So it's very clear what version it is. You know, we want to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting. A lot of times I'll even put the 5-digit product code in the title because I want to be as clear as possible, because these are murky waters to navigate sometimes. With 6 versions made over, whatever, 60, 70 years, it can get a little crazy trying to figure out which one is which. So
absolutely.
There you go. Next.
All right. We have a question from Rick. Is the Vessler version the same as the standard FLE?
You want to show them?
Ooh, look what we have here.
So what is he talking about? To be explained.
Sorry. So this is well, actually, we like bleached this one. We're doing like special. We use desaturation on this. So this is Leica came out with a Lights Wetzlar edition to commemorate things because they do that.
You're really selling it. You're doing a great job. You want me to handle this one?
I'm going to show it off. All right. Yes, it is an FLE. If we get a close up here, I'll show you.
There we go.
And
so cool.
Yeah, you'll notice.
Thanks, Julie, by the way.
I mean, all the color has just been sucked out of this thing. It actually, it's super weird. It looks like one of those tacky photographs where they've desaturated parts of the photo.
This is incredible.
It's insane.
I just want more of these dots. I want to buy some of these dots. Like these neutral colored dots.
So cool.
Sweet.
So cool.
So yes, this is optically and mechanically identical to the standard FLE, except it is totally desaturated.
Yeah.
And it comes with this really, really cool, I know this is minor, but this really cool brass lens cap that you can use to put over the lens ring without the hood attached. So
it's felt inside.
That is really, really cool. That's worth it just for the cap if you have some.
Yeah, and then it's just a push-on cap.
Super cool. I think the front says, let me see the front of it. Yeah, show them the
front.
It says like Wetzlar on the front. Tilt it up a little bit. Yeah, sweet. So they don't sell for that much more, but they are so much cooler.
Yeah.
Oh, love it. Good question.
It's just
a good question that lets me show off something cool we have. So it's a weird.
Yeah, I mean, you can come back to the wide shot. It's funny. People feel kind of split on this, right? Mm. There's always this user versus collector mentality, and
right.
Leica should spend less time making special editions and more time making SL2s or M10 monochromes or whatever. But they're not mutually exclusive to each other. And one of the cool things about Leica is, and certainly I'm going to come at this as a user. I mean, I beat my stuff up like crazy. I use it.
As you guys have seen.
You've seen. I am a user. I want to go out and produce work with it. They are tools. They just happen to be the best tools. But I got to tell you, some of these special edition ones, especially lenses, I've got a real soft spot for special edition lenses.
We both do.
Because it offers the same performance and it's still awesome, but it just looks so cool and unique. Like, you know, you can be, look, to use another analogy, you can be into cars. You could be into performance cars. But isn't it even better if it looks cool? Or maybe is limited in some way or has a unique, you know, paint finish or cool wheels, something.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from how well it's gonna do on a track. It's still gonna be a great track car, but it's just gonna look good doing it. Which is a good segue.
Oh boy.
Ooh, so this I've had for a long time. And you can close up on that.
This is David's
This is one of my
his baby.
This is one of my indulgences in life.
I love how it has a non-Leica brand backup on it. You should be ashamed.
Oh, does it? Oh,
You should
whatever.
be ashamed of yourself.
Like I said, I'm a user, not a collector.
Yeah, that's it.
So this is kind of a unique lens.
It's not for sale. before
It's
anybody
not for
asks.
sale. I'm not selling it. And actually, I think it's the only, not the only, actually that one has it too. But it is one of the only lenses from Leica to have a metal focusing tab,
So nice.
which is so cool.
What is it? Tell them what it is.
This is a 35 millimeter Aspheric Summicron, or Summicron Aspheric, which would be a version 5.
Yes.
It's a modern, but not as modern as the version 6 or version 2 Aspheric. But it is in a very different looking barrel. And this was an anthracite edition. It came with an MP anthracite edition. Perhaps foolishly, perhaps wisely, I actually had the camera as well, and I don't have the camera anymore. I got rid of the camera to basically keep the lens.
Worth it though.
Shame on me, because that
Yeah, I
anthracite
think-
MP is worth a lot. But
It's
so cool.
There are probably more special edition 35 millimeter lenses. How we doing? Zoom out on that. Let me just see.
What's
this
that?
Maybe a good time. Let's see if it's a good time to talk about this because it's like, this is a good time, I think. Okay, so I'm saying this because there are probably more special edition 35 millimeter lenses than any other focal length that I could think of. Yeah, definitely.
But they usually come with a camera.
Correct. They usually come with the camera. They sometimes come by themselves.
Sometimes.
In my experience, the special editions that I don't want to say go up in value, but hold their value the most are the ones that are either a unique lens or include a unique lens, more so than just a minor change, but are actually significantly different, like David's anthracite. A great example of that is this.
Ooh, ghost.
Let's get a close-up of this beauty. We can get the camera over here. This is the M10P Ghost Edition, limited to 250 for the world. And here we go. I mean,
That is so nice
just
looking.
look at that thing. Am I in focus? I can't even.
Actually, you can check out, I did a video highlight of this on our YouTube channel.
So this
you can
is,
see that in detail.
this is the 35 Summilux FLE, current version. It's totally like, it's not white, it's like a light gray with white lettering and gray lettering and a white dot. Probably the same dot as the Wetzlar 35, actually. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, same dot. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So this is an example of an opportunity to have a lens that is both usable, unique, and modern. Because this is the current version. It's not some 3 generations old that Leica's trying to dump. It's this is an FLE. So the Ghost is also the M10P. So it's the most modern rangefinder, color rangefinder that they make, and comes with the most modern 35. So that's one example. The other one, this one is one I just was playing with today. This is the monochrome 246 Andy Summers edition. Now, what I like about this is I like a lot of things, but this is black paint, or they call it black lacquer. So you can see it's not the usual black finish. It's actually very glossy, gorgeous.
Very easy to clean, actually, too.
Very easy to clean, yeah. So this is a 35 Summicron version 6. Now, what's interesting about this lens is, number one, it's aluminum, not brass. So it's actually black paint aluminum, which I've never seen before. It comes with the black paint matching hood, and if you know anything about the version 6, which is the current one, it has a threaded hood. So what Leica did is they modified it. They actually changed the lens barrel to accommodate a clip-on shade so that the black paint sort of fluted or petal-shaped shade could go on. So this is currently the only way, other than the Yormark set, so one of 2 ways in the US to have a black paint 35 Summicron Aspheric version 6. And in 20 years and in 30 years, the black paint stuff is always the most desirable, the most collectible. This camera is fascinating. The leather covering is love it or hate it. It actually looks cooler in person than it does in pictures. If I didn't like it, I would just change it, because how else am I gonna get a black paint 246 with silver dials? I mean, look at the silver accents there. Like, it's just so cool. So that's the Andy Summers. Okay, so that's that. And then I'll show one more for now.
With that black camera?
Okay, oh, this is a cool one. So I don't think I have any other ones floating around here. Yeah. One more cool special edition. This is a 35 Summicron Aspheric version 5, the same version as David's anthracite. This is what's called the black chrome version. So this is a matte black finish, the same finish they use on the monochrome and on the M10s, as opposed to the standard, oops, now I'm being David. As opposed to the standard black. So this is what they would call black anodized, which is the regular black finish. This is black chrome. It's a brass barrel, so it's like 100 and something grams heavier. Comes with a brass matching black chrome hood as well. So it's the same barrel design as the standard Summicron Aspheric version 5, previous version, except it is black chrome. They made 500 of these. They're super rare, super collectible. And just to give you guys an even more sort of thorough visual reference, this is a 35 Summicron version 5 in black paint. Let me get my fingers underneath here. So what we're looking at here is black paint, black chrome. Black paint, black chrome. Not black. Regular black is black anodized. That's the standard stuff. Now, you may just say, well, wait, you just showed me the Andy Summers and that had a black chrome 35 Superclod on it. It did. That was a version 6, the current version, and it's aluminum barrel. So it weighs the same as the standard version. This is the previous version of the 35 Summicron, version 5, which they made in black paint to match the black paint MP. And it has very similar lens hood to the Andy Summers, except the tabs in the hood are black as opposed to silver, minor. But this is that gorgeous, gorgeous black lacquer finish. So the 35 Summicron version 5, that's a mouthful, came in black anodized, black chrome, not black, black paint, glossy black. So depending on your preference and budget and how resourceful you are, you had the option to get them in any finish. So it's actually really cool to have all three together to see how those different finishes look. Yeah, that was a long rant.
But where's the silver one?
Oh, and then of course, right, if we're talking about brass barrel 35 Summicron Aspheric version 5s,
there you go.
35 Summicron Aspheric version 5.
Yeah.
This is a standard production one, just in what they call silver chrome, which means it has a brass barrel instead of aluminum. It's got a filter on it, I'm sorry. This is the predecessor of the current version, which is it has the hood on it. But this is the version 6, version 5. Version 6 is silver anodized, meaning the barrel is aluminum. Version 5 is silver chrome, meaning the barrel is brass. So they look similar, but this one is considerably heavier than this one. And this is also a version 6. How much heavier is it?
Let's see here. Version 6.
1182.
Silver anodized is 252 grams, and then silver chrome is
11674.
304.
Wait, is it more? What?
Yeah, the silver chrome one is definitely more.
Oh God! You threw me. Okay, it's 100 grams more. Sorry,
90,
to have almost 100 grams more to go brass to aluminum. So, anyway, that is the sort of range of the 35 Summicron version 5, and throwing in a version 6 in the mix. So, you can have a lot of fun if you just operated in sort of 35mm focal length ecosystem.
You look like you're swimming through there.
Yeah, there's so many options between different colors, finishes, special editions, vintages. It's bananas. I'm going to stop now. Next question.
Where's the steel one?
The what?
The steel.
They need to make a steel one.
Stainless steel.
So people want to know about vintage Summicrons.
Vintage Summicrons. Okay, well, I mean, they're on version 6. So how vintage are we going to get? Where did this cap come from? I have a mystery cap. Oh, it came from here.
Good work. Good work.
I don't want to lose stuff. Well, okay, so this gets...
also, just to stop you real quick, there was a couple questions here while you were talking about that, asking about those fluted lens shades.
Yes. No. The answer is no.
They want...
If you want to buy one, you got to go online and try to find one. You can't just buy one from a
Well, they're asking, is that the Thorsten shade?
No, this is a Leica shade.
Yeah, this is Leica.
This is Leica's 12504 variant shade. They've made a few versions. This is actually, just to show real quick, this is a 35 Summilux Aspheric version 2, 11870, with the hood that inspired the modern versions of it. This is the 12504 lens hood. So this is where that, because this is a period lens where the lenses I showed you before are modern versions, and they use this hood as inspiration. So this is actually the OG fluted hood. They've become quite expensive. Obviously, they're not making any more, so you got to buy them used, and yeah, they're super cool. But no, everything here is Leica original. There's no aftermarket stuff, other than a few random filters scattered.
And my weird
and your
back
weird,
cap.
it's a Voigtlander back cap, actually.
Oh, yeah, it is.
All right. What was the question again? Vintage Summicrons.
Vintage Summicrons. So, all right. You mentioned at the top of the show, having looked at the range of Summicrons.
Yes.
Version 1 starting in, and the first Summicron was in...
Forever ago.
For 1958.
Yeah, the version
okay,
1, yeah.
1958. That's insane. So, from 1958 to modern day, why don't you kind of walk us through
Sure.
from version 1, version 2, version 3. We already have an idea about kind of
4, 5, 6. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about 4, 5, 6.
Yeah,
Let's talk
yeah.
about 1, 2, 3.
Sure. So, 35 Summicron version 1. And we'll get the close up here, and I'll sort of grab some stuff. This is also known as the 8 element because you guessed it, it has 8 lens elements in it. They made these in Canada and in Wetzlar. The Wetzlar versions are the most.
By the way,
yes,
you notice some similarities here. Move. There we go.
Julie's laughing at us right now because she
Yeah.
knows we have no directional skills.
But if you look at the style of that,
Yeah, it pays homage to that fatter
does.
lower section. So okay, this is the 35 Summicron version 1, 8 element. Very low contrast, surprisingly sharp in the center for a lens from the 50s. I think this is actually sharper than the version 2. Has an infinity lock right here. We love it or hate it. This one, I'll be honest, I'll confess, is actually screw mount. The reason I'm showing it is because it is the same optics as the M mount version, but the screw mounts are super rare. I think there's less than 600 that were made in Germany, and I don't even know how many they made in Canada, but not a lot. So version 1, 8 element, low contrast, pretty solid vignetting, although I think less than its successor. Coveted because of the 8 elements, because of the rendering. Has an interesting bokeh, really kind of stand on its own. Very warm rendering, warm tones, version 1. In black, extremely rare, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. In silver is the much more common variant. They made this with the goggles for, let me just show this again close up. Take off the cap, there we go. This is the same lens, 35 Summicron version 1, except this was designed for the Leica M3, which had a much higher magnification viewfinder and no 35mm frame line. So these little goggles were basically a reverse magnifier so that the 50mm frame lines could be used to shoot and compose in 35. So version 1 Summicron came in M3 and M2 variants, they call them. A little trivia, the M3 version focuses considerably closer. It goes down to, well, not considerably, but somewhat closer. It is, I want to make sure I get the numbers right, half a meter closer, which doesn't sound like much, but having actually got these side by side, I would say it actually is quite noticeable. Okay, so that's the version 1. And then we go to version 2, which is here. Very identifiable by its little, you can see it, aperture adjustment tab.
oh gosh,
Only the version 2s have that. Yeah, it's kind
that's
of a pain
super
in the butt.
finicky.
This is 6 elements, and it's very small. It's got a lot of vignetting. It's also extremely low contrast, a cooler rendering than the version 2. You know, these sit in a weird spot because it doesn't get nearly as much love as the version 4 or the version 1. But number one, if you're going to have all the Summicrons, you got to have a version 2. And if you want something super small and super light, let me take off the rear cap there. It's actually a fun option. It's very, very vintagey. I think it looks more vintage than the version 1, if you ask me. And then we'll finally end on the version 3, which I showed a little bit before. Same number of elements, 6 elements, slightly redesigned. Let's see if I can. It's just so dark. It's black.
No, you got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Redesigned, so less vignetting, higher contrast, a little sharper, nominally so. Version 3, 0.7 meters. A little bit heavier than the version 4, although not by much, although it is still heavier, so the version 4 is the lightest. And the version 3 is a nice balance between not nearly as hard to find or expensive as a version 4, a fun vintage rendering, still sharp at the center, still usable on an M10 or an M10 monochrome, and still very light. So that's the version 4. And of course it has an E39 filter thread, which is nice. You don't have to go to some
Weird,
Series
yeah,
7
yeah.
or anything crazy like that. So
that's kind of a thing. I'm going to ask a follow-up question as well. So let's say I find a version 1
yes.
in great condition
Yes.
with goggles. Now, can I use that on a modern camera? Can I use that on an M10 monochrome?
You can, and you can use that on SL2. You just can't use it.
You want to
without the
mount it and
goggles.
show?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, no, that one.
Oh, on the monochrome.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Hold on. Got an M10 monochrome. Let me pop off the caps here.
It actually looks pretty cool.
All right, so this is 35 Summicron, version 1, 8 element, on an M10 monochrome. to actually see what happens when I turn it on. Look through it. Oh my goodness, that is very dim. Well, also it's pretty dark in the studio too. So let's. I mean, I'm just trying to see how accurate the composing is.
Yeah, you can shoot me.
Here. Actually, it's pretty accurate. I'm using the. It actually brings up the 50 frame lines, of course. It does because it's milled for an M3, which doesn't have 35 frame lines. So it brings up the 50 millimeter frame lines, even on this camera, M10 monochrome. But the goggles reverse, or they demagnify the 50 frame lines to be 35. So I have live view going, and I can actually see that my composition is very accurate, as if I were using actual 35 frame lines.
And you can focus down to 0.65 meters here,
extremely close, yeah, extremely close. So this is actually, and it looks really cool. It's like a cool, I mean, it's a little ungainly, but it
makes a very modern camera look very old.
Yes, and the point is, you can use it. You just saw me do it. I didn't have to modify it or do anything. I just pop it on.
It's pretty cool, right?
Awesome.
So I figured that was kind of a worthy
that's
question.
cool.
When people are looking at the difference between a version 1 and then a version 1 with goggles, they may not think that they could use that version 1 with goggles. So yeah, definitely you can. It might hit. I'm not sure it'll mount on the SL2.
It will.
Well, because of the.
No, it actually mounts fine. I'll show you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see that also.
Yeah, I shot it on the SL2 this morning. So.
Well, I think what's saving it here is the adapter.
Yes. No, it wouldn't mount if it didn't, but it actually has plenty of clearance. I can show this close up here. Well, here we go. So just to kind of show you, it clears just fine.
Yep.
It looks a little bit,
yeah.
funky. It does work. It does work. It literally will work just fine. I mean, I don't think I would use it personally a lot, but if I wanted to have some fun, I don't judge. So
I think it looks a little better on an M. So
yeah, a little bit on an M3, which it was meant to be. So
yeah.
What's next? We're going off crazy tangents here.
So a question from David: how has the specific glass evolved over the years?
Well, it's still clear.
Well, it's more clear.
David, why don't you grab
Yeah,
this
so there's been a few fundamental changes in optical design over the years. The major factors, and this is, I guess, I would issue a little bit of a warning. When you're getting into some of the vintage glass, 2 things at play, or 3 things at play. 1, the adhesive used, the cement, the optical cement between elements, because you have a lot of cemented pairs, especially for wide-angle lenses, can separate. So you can get lens separation, and that's not something you want. Second thing is the coatings on the lenses themselves, specifically on the outside of the lens. So you might see older lenses, they had much softer coatings, so they'd have cleaning marks just from proper cleaning with a lens cloth, but over 60 years, rubbing off a little bit at a time takes its toll, and now all that coating's gone, which makes them very susceptible to lens flare, especially when shooting into light. And then I would say the third issue potentially for older lenses is also haze of elements or fungus growing inside. So these are things you want to look for on lenses. Some of it can be serviced. You can get lenses cleaned. There are certainly people who can handle that, like Don Goldberg, right? As far as things that have evolved in terms of optical design. So kind of looking at that, they've gotten better optical cement. They've gotten far improved coatings and actually gone to multi-coating. And they're, like plasma deposited coating technology now. Very, very thin, very even distribution. The tolerances for production in terms of both spherical and aspherical, the grinding and polishing machines are measured in, microns now in terms of precision. So actually the surface of the lenses can be ground with just this level of precision that no one could even fathom, even 20 years ago. Leica's actually used computers for design since the 1960s. They have refined that, but certainly computer-aided design has helped. And also lens formulations. Back in the day, there used to be Lights ran an entire glassworks laboratory coming up with formulations of optical glass, and they hold countless patents on that. And then, of course, with very modern designs, you also have mechanical precision, and being able to have that mechanical nature to match up to the optical precision of the grinding and polishing, but also to be able to move the lens elements very precisely and also optically center them very precisely. And do things like floating lens elements that can move at a variable rate to the total focusing group, for instance. So there is many factors in terms of how lenses have evolved, how optical design has evolved, and Leica's really taken advantage of that technology to try to constantly improve. And you can see that. Look, we talked about 6 versions of the Summicron, and every single one was an improvement over the previous one. And I guess the last thing that I kind of mentioned but glossed over was Aspheric technology. That was a really big leap. And when we talk about modern era lenses, almost all of the modern Leicas now are ASPH lenses, which means they feature aspherical lens elements, meaning they're not ground spherical or round, but actually have an uneven, non-spherical surface, which is impossible to do with a traditional grinding machine, unless you do it by hand, which Leica did in the early days back in the 70s?
Yeah.
In the 70s, they pioneered. The Noctilux F1 was actually the F1.2, I should say, was the first lens with an aspheric element, but it was hand polished and not necessarily very repeatable. Obviously now Leica has a lot more advanced technology to do aspheric polishing. That's the long answer.
Good answer.
But basically it's not one thing. It's not this one thing made lenses better. Every single one of these changes has allowed Leica to make incrementally better designs over the years. And it's, generally speaking, why newer lenses perform better than older lenses.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's a good answer. And somebody is probably asking this, I just know it, talking about haze and fungus and stuff. Inevitably the question will be, can Leica replace those elements? The answer is sometimes. Dag Camera, who is like a third-party Leica technician, I've seen him work some miracles.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because certain people have new old stock or they cannibalize lenses that are otherwise broken.
Salvage lenses.
It's really case by case. So don't buy a lens that has haze or some damage to an element, assuming that somebody can replace it. It's likely, but always check first with us, and we can check on your behalf or with a service technician to find out if it can be replaced, because that can certainly get quite expensive.
Yes.
Although if a lens is very rare and perfect in every other way and it just has a hazed element, it may be worth it. So it is, but again, it's case by case. There's no guarantee, because we're talking about having to stock 70 years worth of pieces of glass. So
for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I just answered a question that I'm hoping was asked.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think that's a natural.
Yeah.
Natural question.
Next.
All right. So how much change between the two Summar lenses, 2.4 and 2.5?
That's a good question. You got it right in front of you, Dave. You want to take it? You want me to take it?
Doop, doop, right here. Okay. Well, yeah, those are both.
Nothing at all. No.
Nope, nothing. So I'll go over the differences. We got it a little close up here.
Oh, you got it, right?
Yeah.
There you
So
go.
this, I'm just trying to change the apertures to
get them oriented right. Yeah, looking good.
Yeah, looking nice.
Got to look perfect.
Got to look perfect. Okay, so this is, I'm going to just hold that one up first. This is the original 35 millimeter f2.5 Summar. As you can see here, it goes to 2.5. It also has kind of a interesting lens hood shape. So it was one of the first generation of metal screw-on shades. I'll just take that off. This one has a lot of these have a filter.
All right. We got a lot of loans from people, which we'll thank later.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Forgive us.
So nice and compact lens, pretty sharp. But the biggest difference, so okay, we've got, obviously we went from 2.5 and on the later version, 2.4. As far as minimum focus, this is
The same.
Yeah, both are 0.8 meters.
Yeah.
So they made a change on the telephotos, but these stayed the same. I think, cosmetically, you're going to notice the shade is going to be the biggest issue.
Well, I'll interrupt about that while you put it back on. The 2.5 Summar did not include a lens shade.
Oh,
you
yeah.
had to buy
It
it
was extra.
separately.
Right. And the pouch, too.
It did not include a Leica leather case.
Yep.
It included a little
Do
nylon.
you have a, just to show what that is.
Oh, well, there's like a thing.
It's not the right one, but
Hold on, let me get the thing off there.
yeah. So the new one comes with a pouch like this. Not
Right.
This is much larger than it needs to
For
be.
a different lens, but
For a different lens, but the newer 2.4 comes with this
and the hood.
and the hood and a finishing ring. The original Summar, thank you, came with a fabric, like a black fabric pouch.
Pouchy thing.
See
It's
right
also
here, imagine.
about 20 grams lighter, 10%.
Okay. But the biggest thing, just from a distance, you can notice that this kind of variable diameter lens shade versus this constant diameter lens shade. This is a much more modern looking shade relative to the other ones.
It also means that the lens cap and the hood cap
yes.
are the same.
Where do you have that here?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Of course we don't.
I have everything but that.
Yeah, so this will take a round push-on lens cap. I'm actually going to borrow this one. Ooh, look at that.
Oh, it fits.
It fits.
Sweet.
Okay, so this, you'll notice, is a round shade, but because they went with that design, you can actually use it on this, or if you have the finishing ring, it will fit on the lens too.
Yeah, you just gotta have that ring on there. But
Yep.
It still sits on
It still fits, yeah.
yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Obviously, this lens, you had to use a plastic slide-on shade cover, shade cap like that, and then the lens itself just had a clip-on plastic round cap.
Yeah.
As far as optics go, I mean, I think it's maybe a slight improvement for the 2.4.
I think they just reconfigured it because they did call it the 2.4 Aspheric, but I think
the other one was always
Aspheric.
It
they
was
just didn't call it
Aspheric,
that. They felt that wasn't getting its due, so they added it. I think slightly better infinity performance, but otherwise nearly identical.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing because the zoom rates are super sharp, super small, really fast to focus. Turn to turn. Yeah. So, good question. Both good lenses.
If you can get a good deal on a 2.5,
Yeah, get it.
get a 2.5.
Jose's gonna say something.
Right. Yeah, some people are asking about the what's so special about the double aspherical look and the character.
The double Aspherical. Wow, we're jumping around. We're going from one end of the spectrum to the other.
We went from a Summit to
From the least expensive 35 to the most expensive
yeah.
35. I'm fine with that transition. So,
Let's do that.
okay. In the late 80s, Leica designed the first aspheric 35mm 1.4 lens. And the sort of nickname it has now is the double aspherical because it had two aspherical elements, just like the f1.2 Noctilux that David talked about. It was also the first M lens to have concave front and rear elements, a random tidbit. Now, these lenses were extraordinary. This is it, by the way. This is 35-1.4 aspherical. And the reason it's called the aspherical, not the ASPH, is because the barrel actually has the word aspherical spelled out completely. So they call it the 35-1.4 aspherical. This is the first 35-1.4 with any aspheric elements that they made. They made it from, I want to get this right, 1990 to 1994, so for a very short amount of time. There's debates about how many of these they made. I know they allotted less than 2,000 serial numbers, so there's less than 2,000 that were made. I think they maybe less than 1,000. They were very difficult to make. The stories are like it lost money in every one, all this. There's a lot of legend.
Mythology.
You're never really going to know. But what I can say is that these have been incredibly valuable to collectors. The values have doubled in the past 5 or 6 years. They're just getting rarer and rarer and harder to find, especially box and complete. It renders very similar to its successor, the ASPH, and thus by definition, the FLE. A little more vignetting, a little more broken up bokeh, like more like the Bokeh King, where it's not as super smooth transition. It's almost like it is a Summilux with a Superclod bokeh in a lot of ways. Really interesting color rendering, although these days, because the modern cameras have such a wide dynamic and color range, you don't get quite as much of that as you would have gotten on like an M9 or a film, where you were more dependent on the out-of-camera color rendering than you are now. I think the primary reason to have this lens is probably as an investment, and also if you want to flex a little bit. It does have, the sort of older style. Let's see if I can get it here. Here we go. Focus tab.
Oh yeah.
Which is fun. I was using this morning, and it's pretty usable. It unfortunately uses this really obnoxious
monstrous
hood, and this hood is unique to the double aspherical, so it's not on any other lens. These are thousands of dollars to replace if you can even find one on the used market. Yeah, so they're just extremely rare. This is probably the most valuable 35mm M lens. If anyone disagrees with me, please comment, because I may be wrong, at least in terms of without getting into prototypes and ridiculous stuff. So the double aspherical or the aspherical is a lens that just occupies an odd spot. You know, it's Leica's transitioning to a more modern company, more modern design, late 80s, early 90s, very limited production, very hard to make. And its rendering was more unique when it came out than it is now, because I think the modern FLE is so good that this loses a little bit of its magic, although not a lot. It's still, when you hold it in your hands, when you use it and you know how significant it is to Leica as a company and its place in history, there's a lot to it, more so than just the pictures that it puts out. And I'm very grateful to Michelle, thank you, for allowing me to borrow this, your baby, and trusting me with it, because I know these are 5-figure lenses now, or they have been for quite some time, and they're not making anymore. So
they barely made them when they did.
No. If you ever get the chance to try one, please do, because it really, on an SL2, on an M8, anything, it really is fun and special. And I mean, you feel special using it. So I'd be interested if anybody watching this has experience with a double aspherical. I would love to comment, and we'll read them if you have cool stories or things you've tried it on, or stories about owning one, or anything like that, because it is one of those lenses that is pretty special. So, okay,
cool.
Next.
All right, so with regards to vintage lenses, are there any, especially collapsible, that could move back and scratch a digital sensor, especially if adapting to, say, the SL? Not
on 35. There's no collapsible 35s.
No.
And certainly the rear elements on these don't protrude to damage any camera. This is every single 35 they've ever made, and they are all 100% safe to use on any modern camera.
I put them all on an SL2 and an M10 today, every single one you see, so...
No problem.
No problems at all. And there may be some very, very early 35 Summiluxes that won't work with that modification, even earlier than the one I have here. So don't, if you're getting something really, really early, test it first or ask, but 99% of the time you don't have to worry about it, especially anything newer than the super early Summiluxes. So that's a good question.
All right. Next question is from Deborah. How do Summilux and Summicron compare at f2?
Did you do that test today?
I did. The differences are noticeable until about 5.6, and they start to get very close. The modern Summilux at f2 is still sharper corner to corner, because remember, you're talking about one lens wide open and one lens stopped down.
Exactly.
So you're inherently going to get better performance. Yeah. Even if you were only shooting at f2, budget aside and size aside, the FLE still performs more superior.
And I will add, because I shot extensively with both those lenses.
My dog is sleeping.
And then the dog is sleeping.
Sorry,
so I've shot extensively with the modern Summicron, the version 5.
Yeah.
Version 5 Summicron, Aspheric, and both the pre-FLE and the FLE version of the 35 Aspheric, Summilux. And one of the biggest differences for me, because I actually really do like the 35 Cron. I used it forever. Back in the M8 days. I also even used it in film as well. And, it gives kind of a more punchy look. It's got a little bit more pop, color contrast, which I always liked. So that's great. But something the Summilux does way better than the Summicron is flare resistance. So I love shooting a Summilux right into bright light, right into the sun. And its ability to hold contrast right next to a bright light source is unbelievably good. The Summicron, not so much. I'd say of its many characters, many wonderful characteristics and things that it does well, shooting into bright light sources like the sun, not its strong suit. You have to be very careful about getting kind of the sun in the corner of the frame, like up here, because it can flare right across your image. And with these octagon, especially the previous version, the version 5, which only had 8 aperture blades versus the newer one, which has 11, you could actually see these octagons across your frame. The Summilux, I've never seen that. Summilux, I love shooting it right into light and getting those dreamy looks.
I'm looking at the most recent comment. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So I'll wrap up this question. But basically, it's not only about sharpness. The Summilux is a bit sharper, but the Summicron is a very sharp lens. But for me, having such high flare resistance on the Lux opened up photographic possibilities and creative possibilities that I couldn't get with the Cron. So moving on, I know Josh wants to handle this question because he's been looking forward to this all night.
Yeah, because I now I have to thank Gary and the LHSA for loaning me some really hard to get stuff, including this beauty right here, which is, I'm gonna close up here, 35 Summilux version 1 steel rim. You can see the stainless steel rim. They had some with the brass rim, some with the steel rim. These are incredibly rare, less than 2,000, I think right about 1,000 maybe made in silver, maybe less. Incredibly rare to see in this kind of condition. This is a version with the infinity lock. The earlier ones, I believe, did not have that. I have never seen one in person until I borrowed this one. That's how rare these are. And I have seen a lot of lenses. I'm not as old as some of the real Leica gurus out there who probably shot these in the day, but for me, this was really a treat to handle. It's quite small, although it's pretty dense because it is brass. I'll take this one is an amazing shape.
Looks really cool.
It's got really, really clean glass. These had very, very soft coatings, which means they could be easily just ruined. Like Gary, your example looks great. So the steel rims have become incredibly collectible, extremely valuable and rare, and just continuing to go up in value over time. And in terms of how it looks, extremely low contrast, very, very, very strong vignetting, sharp at the center, and very rapid fall off. You will not mistake this for an FLE any day of the week. It's so valuable now, I probably wouldn't use it very much on a camera. Similar to the Aspherical, it would be like a special occasion lens, like if I was going to the Leica factory and wanted people to think I was cool. But if you're collecting 35mm lenses, you gotta have a steel rim. It's an honor to have this lens here for me, to see the first Summilux Leica ever made. I mean, it really is something else. I don't know if anyone has other specific questions about it. I'm just geeking out about it.
No, they're just like, ooh, is that a steel rim?
Yeah, so I was looking at the comments.
Yes, it is.
So thank you again to Gary and the LHSA for that.
Thanks, guys.
We'll do all the shout outs later so we don't bore you with that. But
now,
yes,
I've been looking at some of these while you're drooling on the lens. And someone says, a repeat of the unasked earlier question, which is, do FLE lenses take more effort to focus because they have a floating element? And I think that's a pretty easy answer.
we got 5 FLEs on the table.
Yep, I've got one right here. So,
I mean, my experience with the FLE actually
take the back cap off.
Yeah, is that some copies, people, like out of the box, they're relatively tight. Not tight where they're not linear, it's quite linear, but it's heavier, makes more effort. But I've seen people get them serviced so that they're much looser. So
I'll show these two as an example.
They come tighter, but they're not stuck with that. I mean, I've handled hundreds of copies of these because it's a lens that it's like a commodity. We get them all the time. How does that one feel, David?
So this one, well, I noticed when we were playing with it earlier, was very tight. And especially something that you should keep in mind is when you're testing these, always remove the back cap because with the floating lens element, in some designs, it can create a lot of pressure with the back cap, which can make it actually stiffer to focus or seem stiffer. So when you take that off and then you want to hold it by the back non-turning part, right, on the closest to the lens mount. And, you know, it's not like, it's definitely stiffer than a well-worn one, but definitely usable and smooth. Now, if I put the cap back on, and this is a pretty snug fit, it's noticeably harder to turn the ring. Not stuck or anything like that, but if you really want to get an accurate picture, you want to take that off and turn it this way. This is much easier to turn without the cap.
I want to say one thing as well. I don't know if the reasons for this, if it's depending on who's doing what. There definitely is some FLEs with heavier focus rings and looser aperture adjustment, and some with heavier aperture adjustment rings. And you know, it really depends, but thankfully, you're not at the mercy of the way the lens is currently. DAG or Leica can tighten or loosen either one of those rings to taste. I think Leica probably has some certain standard that they want them all to be in, and they put them out that way, but you know, owning a Leica lens is a very personal experience, and you should have it adjusted to your taste. I've had that done many times. It's not a big deal.
Now, if we take a look at my lens that I use a lot, you can see.
Yes. Can we get a close-up? Yeah.
Okay, now this one obviously turns a lot smoother. It's not loose. When I let go of it, if I dial in focus and let go, it sticks. So this is, for me, the absolute perfect amount of drag. It's just, we'll call it fingertip smooth.
Yeah, you got to use these things.
You have to use it.
If you let it sit and you pick it up after a year, you're going to have to work it.
Yeah.
Because it's a mechanical instrument with lubrication and gearing.
And that's a good point.
Yes.
So I'm going to demonstrate this. If you're sitting there watching TV.
Watching us.
Or watching us on Red Dot Forum Camera Talk.
Hours and hours and hours of us talking about lenses.
If you take your finger here and do that, keep it pressed in, and then just sit there, and it's a good like fidget spinner, right? Just turn the lens, focus back and forth, just like that, for a while. And what'll happen is it will soften up. It'll smooth out because, you know, just that motion of it's kind of like breaking in a baseball glove.
Yeah.
You know, you just gotta put in the time to make it yours and make it smooth and buttery. And I've used this lens for 10 years and it's smooth. And it's not smooth to the point where, you know, it's loosey-goosey and not sticking where I leave it. It's that perfect amount of drag.
Yeah.
And you can, and like Josh says, you can have that adjusted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easy.
It is adjustable, especially on the newer lenses. The mechanics are really precise and really smooth.
Yeah.
You know, this, I would say, if you hear that, I probably do need to get this sent in because the spring for the Aperture D10 is a little bit on the rough side.
This lens has been used extremely heavily for a decade. So
yeah, but compare it to a new one.
Yeah.
That's what it should sound like.
Yeah.
Not.
It's not that much different, but it's noticeable.
It's functional.
Put the back cap on, will you please?
It's functional, but it drives me a little bit.
There you go.
A little bit crazy. So the answer is.
I forget the question.
Are they difficult to focus?
Yeah.
The answer is no, not really, but maybe they come from the factory a little bit tighter. And that's not to say that all FLEs do, but all new lenses do.
There you go.
And yes, FLEs can be stiffer to focus if you leave the back cap on.
Yeah, or if you let it sit for a couple of years.
Or if you let it sit. But that's every lens.
Yeah, that's true. Any lens.
This stuff's meant to be used. Go out and shoot.
Yes. What do we got next?
All right. A couple of people asking about which 35mm lens has that 3D Leica pop.
FLE. 3D pop means micro contrast. Micro contrast means you need to have a modern lens for that. Anything older than that, it's like it falls off a cliff. I think a lot of that also comes from post-production. If you want more of that, because now the cameras have so much dynamic range that the files are flatter out of camera than ever, which is what you want. But it's certainly there. But I think the FLE on an M10 or an M10 monochrome, you get a lot of that right out of camera, more so than you would with any other focal length, because they're all lower contrast. They're all lower micro contrast, all less. But I don't, I can play with that in Lightroom. I'm not necessarily freaking out about micro contrast. I'm more interested in sharpness, focus fall off, bokeh, things that I can't turn a slider and adjust so easily.
Right.
Clarity and texture tools. What do they call them? Presence tools.
Presence, yeah. Texture, yeah.
Download, I'm going to mention this and get in trouble, but download David's Lightroom Leica presets on Red Dot Forum if you want to get a better baseline for getting good micro contrast in your files.
There's a link to it in the description right below.
There you go. Shout out to David.
Thank you. So something interesting about the 35 Summilux that you talk about contrast. Something else that I've noticed about the lens that is kind of one of my, call it on my like list of that lens, is that it can really behave differently depending on what light I'm shooting in. I can take that lens on the same camera and shoot in really soft, subtle light, and I get a really dreamy, soft picture. Not soft out of focus, but soft rendering and contrast. Very subtle in terms of how it renders the whole image. And then I can go into some really, call it golden hour light where the sun is right behind me and it illuminating my subject head on, and it pops. So I can get that same kind of high contrast look with the correct light, but I can also get that kind of softer, low contrast look in softer light. And that sounds pretty obvious, but not all lenses behave that way. some lenses really like to be shot with full light because they behave properly, and then you go into soft light, and they just look a little murky or muddy.
Yeah.
The Lux, I think, just balances those two different shooting scenarios so well, and that, I don't know. I know that's slightly off topic. It's not micro contrast like you're talking about, but macro contrast and how it responds to the different level of illumination. So
I mean, that's good insight, really good insight, and it just shows you how versatile the FLE is on the camera. So, next.
All right. So how does the FLE perform in on M film cameras?
I haven't shot it on film. I've seen people shooting it on film. It's still extremely well because you're all getting all the benefits that you get on a digital camera.
I shot the pre-FLE back in the day on an M7, and good.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you're not going to get as much of the benefit, but certainly on a low-speed film or slide film, oh yeah, you're going to see the difference. And especially that floating element is still giving you better performance at close focus, still reducing focus shift. So you're still getting all those perks. You just have to get the film process before you can see it on the.
Yeah.
You don't get the screen, the instant gratification. But yeah, I don't think there's any real downside to owning an FLE. Like, again, everyone's budget's different, and I get that. But that aside, like, you can have an FLE, and then you've got the best 35, and then if you still want to get more 35s, you've always got that one, and then all the other ones are just for fun.
Right.
The FLE is your workhorse because you know it's going to perform. There's nothing better than it. Next question.
I like that.
Are brass versions any different from non-brass in terms of focus stiffness?
Yeah, there's upsides and downsides to that. The brass ones tend to have a smoother feel, but the brass ones, when they don't get used for a long time, they get sticky. In fact, this lens is fine. Where was the one?
Mine? Let's see.
Yours is
no, this is buttery smooth.
Where did it go? Here we go. Let's see. This one's not bad, but this is the version 4 silver chrome, which probably hasn't been used much. Sorry, Gary, to call you out. But this is not bad. But over time, the brass lenses I've seen, if they don't get used, it's like
Gummy?
Yeah, a little gummy.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to get fixed. This one had it. That's why I was thinking I had DAG service this one, and now take the back cap off. Now it is very, very smooth. But I don't know if they feel that much different. I mean, you're certainly moving more weight around in terms of.
I feel like the Aperture rings are very different, though. They have more of a clunk, clunk, clunk.
Yeah. The Aperture ring definitely has more like.
The detents are heavy.
Yeah. It's not dramatic. I think a little bit of it's in your head, but like, I don't know if I could. I'm just trying out a few brass ones here to see. Well, like here's the same lens in brass, and where's the other? Well, here's this one. Let's see. I'm trying it. Okay, this is aluminum. I'm trying it. I'm feeling it. Okay, feeling the Aperture ring. Okay. Now this is brass. Let's see. I mean, I don't know.
Check the Aperture on that one.
Okay, the Aperture ring feels much more different, much differenter than the focusing does. The Aperture ring really's got some heft, some weight to it.
Yeah, it does.
Like you really feel like you're turning something on the brass versus
even on this one with the light ring.
Yeah. So that wasn't really a good answer, but now we're getting into the super nerd stuff. Minutia. But hey, it's a good question. I mean, I like it. I like brass lenses because
you should feel how smooth that one is, though.
Let me see. Ooh.
Yeah.
Very nice.
That one's silk.
The brass lenses, they're heavier, so you feel like you've got something more. They wear differently. The black painted brass lenses will show brass underneath as they wear, which is awesome. So I don't know. And they tend to be rarer, more collectible, which is cool too. So.
Yeah.
Next.
All right. Is there anything you guys want to mention before we keep going with some other questions?
Well, I would like to thank everybody who helped us put this show together. Gary and the LHSA, Michelle, John, Javier, and I'm forgetting someone for sure. No, they're going to yell at me. And Don Goldberg at DAG, of course, for giving us, also John, the other John, both Johns with no H's, interestingly enough. For giving us the opportunity to amass this collection of lenses in one place, and also Julie, I guess, for letting me steal your stuff that she didn't know I was taking. Because as we've talked about every episode lately, we can't put this together without everyone's help. Because It's not like I have version 1 through 6 of Supercrons lying around.
You don't?
No, I don't actually.
Oh.
So the past 2 weeks I have spent gathering up and borrowing and stealing. No stealing.
Not yet.
This collection. Yeah, you're not getting any of these back, anyone. Sorry, these are all mine now.
Commission.
Especially that double Aspherical. That's right. So I do want to mention that. I do want to thank everybody and be aware I'll be hitting you all up for the 50 show because there's a whole bunch of 50s I want to talk about.
I think there's more 50s though.
I promise that'll be the end of it because then we're going to get on to other stuff. But I definitely want to thank LHSA, Leica Society, which is the LHSA.
I have a link down below.
Yes.
Yep.
And everyone else who helped make this happen. I really, really, really appreciate it. David appreciates everybody here.
I do. Thank you so much, guys.
We would not have been able to do this and talk about this stuff with this level of knowledge and in-depth assessment if we didn't have your help. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next question, please.
All right. What in the design primarily impacts the transition from in focus to out of focus?
I think it's every aspect of the design. The
Yeah.
number of elements, spherical or not, floating element or not, the coatings. There's every aspect of the design. I'm not an optical. David knows
No.
more about optics than I do.
Yeah, but that's like what makes a car fast. I mean, I don't think that
It's a good
there's-
question,
yeah.
but it's not a question that has a simple answer because I think a lot of it is the artistry and the skill of the designer, whether it's Walter Mandler or Peter Carba or anyone else.
Max Barrick.
Yes, thank you. The one I'm missing. It's they put their stamp on the lens in the way that it draws and the way that the bokeh is. So, yeah, that's a good question, but there's not a quick answer to that.
I mean, I could add this.
Yes.
From the great Peter Carba. He is always quick to dispel the notion that of a clinical lens, modern design is often said, oh, it's clinical. But he has made it very clear that clinical, in kind of layman speak, is the lack of aberrations, which is aberrations is a fancy word for bad things that can happen in your image because of glass.
Yes.
It can be reflections, coma, astigmatism, distortion.
Things you don't want.
These are all aberrations. And a lens designer balances, putting in additional pieces of glass to fix certain problems. But you put a piece of glass in to fix one thing, and it's like whack-a-mole. Something else goes wrong. And you have to fix that by putting another piece of glass in, or a different piece of glass. And you can end up with these crazy designs that might be optically perfect, but maybe the bokeh suffers because you have all this glass and now you've got squirrely bokeh, even if everything else is perfect. So Leica definitely takes the out of focus elements and the look of the bokeh into their optical design very, very purposefully. But according to Mr. Carba, who knows a thing or two about lenses, if you can effectively remove all the aberrations and have as perfect an optical design as possible with the fewest elements as possible, you can actually get the most perfect and smooth bokeh achievable. So actually, that mythical perfect lens will have the smoothest bokeh, not the one with the most imperfections. The one with the most imperfections will have probably the most imperfect bokeh. That's the way the logic works. So I think a lot of people tend to get mired down in this, oh, these modern designs are so perfect, they sacrifice the artistry. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth in terms of how these are really designed when you talk to the people who design the lenses.
Yeah, well said. I want to answer
what do you got?
Yuri's question. So how does the FLE M lens compare to the Apple Summicron SL 35mm lens?
Oh, okay.
That's actually, I've done this test, so I can tell you. Apple SL, sharper. Especially in the corners, especially wide open. Not as warm. The bokeh is not as, I want to describe this the right way. The transition from in focus to out of focus is not as drastic on the Summicron versus SL, on the Summicron SL versus the FLE. FLE falls off faster. FLE has more vignetting. I think the FLE is better for portraits and better to get an M look on an SL or an SL2. 35 Apple SL, flawless. Wide open, it's as sharp as it is at f5.6. Corner to corner performance is incredible. Not a lot of identifiable character, which in this case is actually good because I don't want that.
That's what I was just talking about.
On a lens that's designed to perform on a super, super high level on a pro body. But
The bokeh is very smooth, though.
It's extremely smooth.
And there's
it's
no-
actually
right.
more, almost Summilux-like,
Right.
but it's not. It doesn't fall off as fast, meaning there's more depth of field, and you just can see it when you look at the way that shapes render, where they're more kind of amorphous with the FLE than they are with the Summicron. They're more easily identifiable shapes. They complement each other very well.
I would say this
35.
though. Remember,
Yes.
minimum focus,
Well, the SL is going to focus a lot closer.
which
Way closer.
means, given that even with the aperture disparity of 1.4 to f2, if you can get closer,
Sure.
you're going to get more out of focus.
True, but it's still not. It looks the character's very different. The 35 FLE is actually a lot more. I keep using these bad grammar. A lot more similar, a lot closer to the Summars S35. They render very similarly because I've tested the FLE, the S lens, and the 35 SL on an SL2 at the same time. The Apple Summicron SL35 is the objectively finest 35mm lens they've ever made for anything.
That's true.
It's a different tool for a different job. It doesn't, to me, compete with the FLE, especially because one's an M lens and one's not, and one's way bigger. But it is a masterpiece of optical design, without a doubt.
I will say, and I have said before, that I do use the 35 Summilux M on the SL and SL2.
Sure. So do I.
I find it to be a great complement to my standard 24 to 90 kit because it gives me such a different look. And if I'm doing, kind of low-key street photography kind of stuff, putting this on an SL2,
Yeah, we can do it.
yeah, we'll do it. It's so much smaller and more discreet.
Yeah, I mean, you should watch our SL two-part episodes. We talk a lot more about this.
So small.
Yeah, but look at that.
Yeah. So
I'm not gonna, I don't want to get into an argument or whatever about which is better because they're different. But certainly, the SL is sharper.
yeah, no doubt.
Which is pretty amazing considering how good this lens is, and we've been going on and on about it for the entire episode. Anything good in the comments there, David, that we want to tackle?
Someone asked if we could just take one lens out of all of these, which one would it be? And I think we just answered that one.
FLE. I would take the FLE Ghost Edition, though. I would take this one.
Oh,
No special editions, though. No special editions.
Oh, well, the regular FLE.
I'll take the light sweat solar then.
That's a special edition, too. It doesn't count. All right, that's a good question. What else?
Let's see.
We're getting close to our wrapping up. I cannot believe well, I guess I can, that we can cover 2 hours
It's insane.
on one focal length. To me, that's the best part of being a Leica nerd, is how many other anythings can you spend 2 hours on one type of lens? I mean, it's insane. And we haven't even talked about everything. I mean, look at this. Look at this here. Okay. This is a 35 Summilux pre-aspheric in titanium.
Ooh.
How cool is this? Well, we'll get a close-up shot. You can see this is like the successor to the steel rim, although it's the same product code, I believe. Brass barrel, super small. Look at this thing. This thing is nothing. There's nothing to it. Titanium finish, so just like the Aspheric titanium, actually. Love having these two together.
Half the size.
Yeah, but way smaller, way lighter. Renders totally different, much lower contrast, wild bokeh, all kinds of swirls. It looks like, you put this on a monochrome, it looks like you're shooting, something from the 70s or the 80s, because you are. Compare that to the regular version in black. Here we go. Same lens. One's got a hood on it. And here we go. So here we go. Titanium, black. Again, the same exact lens, same optics, same everything, just one's titanium and brass and one's black and aluminum. But these lenses are so small. They're so much fun. They've been great investments. They continue to go up in value for good reason, because they're not making any more of them. They're not making a lens this small. That's a 1.4. There's nothing else that looks like it. This particular one being brass, it's got incredibly beautifully weighted focus ring. I mean, I'm just going to go on and on and on. Thank you, Michelle. I'm never giving this back to you. I am actually going to go out tomorrow morning. I think I'm going to shoot this on the M10 monochrome just because I can. Maybe the double aspherical. Maybe I'll bring out the steel rim and the titanium and the double aspherical all together and just go to town. So there are so many fascinating turns you can take when you're navigating the road of like a 35mm. Yes, everyone should have an FLE just to have it. Sorry, I'm just going to put it out there. Once you get beyond that, though, it's awesome. Okay, let's actually answer some questions if we have any. We must have some in the comments. I mean,
Yeah, some people still asking about more vintage lenses and
what else do you want to know?
rendering
It's like, I mean, there's so much to cover. I would say you need, if you get the chance to try, like, don't discount putting a vintage lens on a modern camera.
Cool.
Don't expect it to work like an FLE.
It's not.
But it's fun. I mean, you can see how excited David and I get. I'm like going bananas over here because we both love 35. I mean, you saw how David goes on about his anthracite. So, yeah, none of these lenses are for sale, by the way. So I don't want to see any comments like, can I buy this, blah, blah, blah. Maybe one of these is, but like, that's none of the ones you want. And that just shows you how passionate, because they don't come up that often for sale. And when they do, they get snapped up like that because they're all usable. I mean, they're all usable.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And I should mention anything version 3 or 4 or newer can be 6-bit coded because they have the same product code from version 3 and 4, 11310, I think. Or version 2 and 3 or 11309. Newer than that can be 6-bit coded by Leica.
You're talking about Summicron or Summilux?
Summicron. And Summilux double aspherical or newer can be 6-bit coded by Leica as well. So we should put a link to this in our description. But Leica does have
that's it. Okay.
What?
Would you actually take a double aspherical and have it 6-bit coded?
Yeah, because I would say this. I would, and I'd ask for the original mount back.
Okay, because that, I was just gonna say, just like an antique and
Right.
like you polish it
I
up
agree
too
with
nice.
that. Yeah, you're right. I'd want to have the original mount so I could always revert back to original. But if I was going to use it, yeah, why not? Get a CLA. I mean, I sent it right to Germany. I wouldn't send it to anywhere else. But why not? I have no shame, because I want to use it. It is made to be used at the end. I know I've talked about like investment and all this nonsense.
That one even I would be a little nervous about using that.
No, you wouldn't. You would take no cap. You throw it in your bag, and you'd be going and you'd be dropping it. It would look like your FLE.
Hey, that doesn't look that bad. It doesn't look that bad.
I don't know. I think we are so spoiled with the versions, the special editions. I mean, these black paint lenses are incredible. The Ghost edition, all this wild stuff that we can get our hands on and use is what makes it so much fun to be.
By the way, we missed one.
What did we miss?
We missed one.
What?
There was a comment, and I was like, oh, you're right. That's right. The ASC 100 edition.
The gold one. I
one.
tried to get one and I failed miserably.
Yeah.
I tried to get the gold.
It's very cool looking in person. We just had one.
We did a video, didn't we? Yes. We do have a video. I don't know if that's on the LSM YouTube channel or not. Somewhere. Of what did you just drop?
That's my phone. It's got a case.
Slow clap. We do have a video somewhere on our somewhere pages of sort of like an overview of the ASC edition, so you can check it out there.
Yeah.
That's a version 5 in brass, gold anodized
So
color.
cool.
So cool. But like I said, there are so many special edition 35s. I tried to get as many as I could, and I'm grateful to everyone who helped me gather this collection, and David for letting us borrow his stuff. But yeah, I don't have them all. I mean, there's certainly some ones that I wanted to try to get the Stealth 35 Cron.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with the glow in the dark paint, I failed at that. Yeah. But again, I at a certain point, like, you guys have to just know that there's more than this. If you have a specific question about one that's not here, just ask me, and I'll either answer it now or.
Someone actually says I got 2 of them right here.
2 of what?
I don't know.
Oh, I want them, whatever they are.
Yeah. If you have 2, I want 1.
I want them both.
So someone also asked, there was an interesting question of, why do they see so many of the Magnum photographers, like Alex Webb, shooting with the Cron and not the Lux?
Photographers are poor.
Some photographers are. I mean, I don't know.
Because it's smaller.
I mean, I'd also say the same thing. Like Costamanos uses a Cron.
Yeah.
He loves the Cron.
Well, I think it's a combination of budget and size. I mean, these people are out all day, and 100 grams can make a difference when you're carrying a camera, especially if you have 2 or 3 lenses.
Yeah. Or 3 cameras,
bodies, yeah. And they're a lot of times shooting super high-speed film anyway, so. Yeah, and also remember, well, I say remember, but I didn't really cover this. Period to period, 35 Summicrons up until recently were actually sharper than the 1.4s.
Yeah. I think that is the most important point.
Yeah.
Those early Luxes, like you said, the bokeh is crazy and swirly.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it was. The Summicrons, through the years, up until the Aspheric.
Yeah, well, double aspherical, really.
I mean, well, yeah. But this is,
Yeah.
let's call it in actual production terms.
Yes.
Getting up to the modern Aspheric version. The Crons were just always better than the Luxes. And that flipped, especially when we got to the FLE version. It just flipped the script, because as good as these Crons have been, and especially the Summicron Aspheric is really good, just the Lux edges it out. And that's So for the vast majority of the history of 35 millimeters, I guess the reason the pros went to the Crons is both size, budget, and also quality. Especially someone like Alex Webb, who was shooting mostly at f8, f11 on slide film and bright light, and he's looking for that depth of field.
Yeah.
He didn't need something that was super fast. So maybe you'd find more straight photojournalists, spot news kind of stuff, where they were using the Luxes because they needed the low light ability, for news photography. But up until recently, Cron was always better. Now the Lux is a little better.
Yeah, that's a good question.
But I think that's probably more the answer.
We got time for like 2 more, maybe, if we got some good ones floating around. David, why don't you poke around the comments and see?
Some people are asking about the 35 Summicron.
Oh, I didn't really talk about that. Well, they made a 3.5 and a 2.8 Summicron. 3.5 came first, early 1950s.
These were the first 35s.
Yeah, and the
for
Summicron
M
2.8 came later. They're inexpensive. They're kind of not good on digital.
You see that really cool looking version 1 Cron?
Yeah,
Just get that instead.
Yeah. Look, I mean, if you're working within a certain budget, they're fun, and they're M mount, which means they'll work on any M camera ever made. I'd get one without the goggles if I could, because that's just going to get in the way. But they don't have high contrast. They're barely sharp in the center. They're quite finicky to use because they're very small and like mechanically. I don't want to bash them because in period, they were. Here we go. This is a Summicron 2.8 with goggles. It's not a lens that enters the conversation very much unless you're after the lowest contrast, the most vintage look, but not really much bokeh because it's a 2.8. It's fun. It's fun on an M3. It's just not a lens I would put on an SL2 and go out shooting around the town on. But a valid question because it is a 35 millimeter lens and I haven't talked about it. So I guess that's, this is let me just pop this one here. This is the earlier version. Oops, I'm breaking stuff. This is the Summicron 3.5 with goggles as well. Kind of a chunky little guy. They're cool and they're different. Whatever. I just not a lens.
You don't sound excited.
Well, because I can't get excited on digital because it's like, it transcends cool vintage and just becomes mushy, unusable for the most part. I mean, I'm being hard on it for no good reason, but I would say a version 2, version 1 Cron is better. I know they're more expensive, so I respect that, but just overall, go with the Cron if you can.
So I have a couple comments here that Leica said that the double aspherical can't be 6-bit coded.
Really? I mean, there's usually when there's a code in the camera's menu, they can code it. And there is this 11873 code in the menu. I could be wrong. I mean...
We have to check.
Yeah. Here I'm talking about stuff. I guess I just took it for granted. I'll be honest, I don't see a lot of double aspherical, so I'll find out. Yeah.
So that was 2 different people.
Yeah, call me out. If I don't want to say something wrong. I mean, I do all the time on a daily basis, sometimes hourly.
This one's funny.
Okay.
I know you hate these questions, so I'm going to ask you.
I know exactly what the question is. Ask it. Go ahead. Go ahead. It's fine.
Any word from Leica about a 35 Noctilux?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this is... Oh, wait, no. We've talked about this before, and...
We have no idea.
We don't know. We would love to see one. I mean, if I get a say, count me in. It would be probably like $25,000 and the size of a house.
Yeah.
But...
It would be awesome.
It would be awesome, yeah. I mean, they did the 90 Summilux, right? So now making 35 Noctilux.
Yeah.
I think this is a case of we want but won't buy.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I'm not speaking from a position of inside knowledge here, so I could be totally wrong. I don't know if they could justify the manufacture of one and recoup the expense. Unless it was like a limited edition and it was ludicrously expensive but really special, but I don't know. I really don't know.
Look, from my point of view and how I've approached lenses, I'd say I would prefer if Leica went the route they went with the 50s and the Cron, because there was a 50 Summicron Classic, there was a Mandler design. We'll talk about this next episode, little teaser. And the 50 Summilux Aspheric was a good step better than that. And they did something crazy. They came out with a exotic Apo Summicron.
I'm gonna look for a document
in 50 millimeter. So me personally, and again, this is me wanting things. This isn't me making things happen. I would prefer, to a Noctilux, I would prefer a 35 Apo Summicron M that was, let's say, they took what they learned on the Apo Summicron SL 35 and put that into M. And again, like Josh is saying, they may not be able to justify that because even if they could design one, the price they'd have to charge and the amount they'd have to sell, they may not have enough people willing to do that because most people would want to just opt for the 35 Summilux FLE, which is amazing.
Yeah, I don't see the 35 Lux Aspherical on the official Leica 6-bit coding list. That's what I was looking at here. And now I'm on a mission, so I'll find out. I mean, I'm sure people are right and I'm wrong, but I like to have hard data. So I will reach out to the Germans next few days and see what they say.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my take is
yes,
I'd rather have the highest performing small, let's say like 35 Apo Summicron M. But again,
give me everything. I want it all.
But if they had to charge too much and not enough people would buy it, they can't make it.
Right.
Leica can, I'm sure, I would love to be a fly on the wall in the optics department of Leica.
So
because as much, as you've seen in terms of what lenses make it out to production, imagine, the brainstorming sessions of what they could do if they didn't have to worry about who would buy it and how much it would cost.
Right.
That, to me, would be incredible because they are this insanely talented group of designers, and they're cranking out just amazing optics, but that's within constraints. Imagine if there weren't any.
I mean, who knows?
That would be amazing.
We'd have a 21 to 200 F1 that was just sharp.
No, you're not supposed to talk about that.
Oh, my goodness. Look at that selection. Look at those
yeah.
toys. We've got, again, I put this all together today, and I was doing my testing this morning, and I spent the past 2 weeks gathering the goodies. So this really gives you a chance, thank you, Jose, this is a cool shot, keep it going, to see this collection that we have amassed. Ooh, look at that, double aspherical. I mean, never in my life would I have expected to have this opportunity to have ones both to see and to test, and I've been weighing them and seeing which ones are heavier and how accurate the specs are and all kinds of ludicrous stuff. And it really gives you a great appreciation for where Leica started and where they are now when you get to spend an afternoon trying 70 years worth of lenses one after another. It really,
super awesome.
I should actually start charging people to come and do this testing with me for $1,000 a day. You can join me as I test 27 different 35mm lenses and then see what they look like. That would actually be a fun workshop for like the nerdiest of all.
It would, yeah.
I bet that 10 people watching this would do that with me.
I bet someone's gonna be like, me,
yes,
me.
One day I will do that in the future. Maybe next year I'll do like a lens testing nerd out with Josh workshop. We'll get our pocket protectors and our scientific calculators. It's gonna be awesome.
We don't have pockets though.
Well, I'll specifically go and get one.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool,
obviously,
cool.
I got to be dressed for the
Very
occasion.
nice, very nice.
Josh, I have
Yes.
maybe one last question.
I
for
know.
you.
It's got to be a last question though, because
My
we're
friend James, if you have an FLE, which additional 35 would you recommend for a different look?
Ooh, that's a great question. One of two. I would get a version 4 if I could find one, because that's a lot smaller. But if you wanted something really vintage, 3514 pre-aspheric version 2, not the steel rim because those are crazy, or 35 Summicron version 1. Those would be one of those two,
Yeah.
or one of those three, I guess. Something, because if you've already got the FLE, it's the biggest 35, kind of. Not that they're that.
It's not big.
But I'm saying it is the biggest. So I'd want something that was older, smaller, very different. And I think
right. So imagine,
here's a version 4.
this size versus.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so much lighter.
Yeah. Or a version. Actually, I said a version. I meant a version 3. Sorry, I'd get a version 3 because it's the polished version. Of the
I'm just
version
gonna
2.
do that just so you can see that literally palm of your hand.
Yeah. Because version 4 is just so expensive now that I think version 3 is the next buy for me because it is very different from the FLE. The version 4 is really good. Version 3 looks really different. So, yeah, I'd get a version 3 Summicron and an FLE, and I'd be very happy with that.
Or if you have a black 35 Summilux, get a silver one.
I want to also talk about really quick, Jose, if I can get a close up. The lens hoods on the Summicron version 5 and the version 4, the 12526, 12524, and 125, so 12524 and 12526 hoods, here we go. use, which Leica no longer makes, they use the 14043 cap, which is quite flimsy and falls off easily, and you can't get this anymore. So if you own a lens that takes this hood, the 125-26 or 24 hood, the plastic hood, even if you still have your cap, put it back in the box and buy this one. This is the LCSRO2 made by Match Technical. They make the thumbs up. I've talked about this before. It's a direct replacement for the 14043 cap. It actually is a lot nicer. It fits much sturdier, covers more of the hood, so it protects it when it's not in use. And to me, this is, even if I had the 14043 cap, which is here, this is the original Leica cap, because these are unattainable, you can't get them anymore, they're so easily lost, I would just put it in the box, put it away, never use it. Get the Matchtech cap, works really well. I'll show it on the version 4 here also. So this is the 12524 hood, fits beautifully, protects it, and then the 12526 hood on the version 5 doesn't come off. Really, really nice. So anyway, just a quick little tip for a often lost component.
Good tip.
Yes, I wanted to mention that.
Very nice, very nice.
I think we probably covered everything we could ever possibly cover, although we certainly will be monitoring the comments. When I say we, I mean David.
Yeah.
And if you have additional questions, or if you realize that I talk way too fast, rewatch this at 0.75x speed.
Yes, the
Josh
speed. The Josh speed.
I can't control myself because I get so excited, and I'm not ashamed of that. But I find even when I rewatch for my own notes, I play it at 0.75 because I talk slower, especially if you're not a non-native English speaker and you want to glean any of my useless insights.
Or
yes.
If you don't mind listening to it a little faster and you want to get through all of the questions we did, you can do it 1.25x.
Josh at 1.25x is unintelligible, I'm pretty sure.
It's like Josh on 20 cups of coffee.
Yes, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So I do try to go slower, but it's hard because number one, David and I have so much to cover.
Yeah.
But that's why that 0.75x playback speed is, call it Josh.
That's a YouTube pro tip right there.
Yes, for sure. Okay.
Okay, so
We've done it.
I think that we've answered most of the questions that have come in.
Yes.
Hopefully. We've talked about some of the new lenses. We've talked about some of the older vintage lenses. If you have other questions, like Josh said, leave a comment below. After the video, it's going to take a couple hours for YouTube to do its thing and go from live to playback. But once there, you can leave a pretty permanent comment, and I will be monitoring that over the next week or two.
Yeah, for sure.
And try to get you the answers. We'll also do a little digging on the 6-bit coding questions, things like that. Because, we appreciate the questions. We appreciate the enthusiasm that you guys have. Again, it's been an honor for us to be doing the series and continue on with our Red Dot Forum camera talk. Certainly, Josh and I look forward to this. And where else will we have an opportunity to have access to all the toys?
That's right.
So this has been an amazing excuse for us to just do what we love to do.
Yeah.
And thanks so much. I do want to always give a shout out to Jose for doing a great job producing the show.
Thank you. Awesome show today.
And thanks again to our colleagues, Kirsten and Peter, who make sure everything goes smoothly in the comments and help you guys out there.
And thanks, Julie, for letting me raid your collection.
For those people who don't know, Julie is my wife, who I'm the shooter, right? And I say I'm not a collector. Julie, my wife, she's a burgeoning collector of some
She has good taste.
She has great taste.
Mostly because someone who knows what they're doing curates the collection for her, but whatever. That's a totally different story. We love you.
Yeah.
I think stay tuned for the 50mm episode, which should be a good one.
Yeah.
I imagine it'll have even more lenses than this to show, including some very, very, very special guest lenses that you may have never seen before, at least in practical demonstration. So.
And if you just feel like you want to volunteer some crazy 50mm that you think we're on the lookout for.
Yes. Oh, please. I will shout you out. I will give you some Leica swag, whatever. If you have something wild, 1.2 Noctiluxes or even the 1.5 Summar or crazy vintage stuff, version 1 rigid black paint, whatever. If you got something cool and you're okay loading it, we pay for the shipping both ways. So
and we'll take good care of your babies.
David's only dropped a few of these, so totally fine.
Well, now you should note that you see all the modern lenses over here, and then all the vintage lenses.
All the really fancy ones are on my side. Yeah, because we know who's gonna drop this.
It's like he you know, like David proofed the table. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
All right.
thanks so much. We're having a great time doing this. Be sure to give us a thumbs up if you like the video. If you want to see more stuff like this in the future, be sure to subscribe to Red Dot Forum YouTube channel. Also, check out, we did post in just over the last week. I did finally got up my S3 review, Leica S3 review, which I know is completely unrelated to this.
Still cool though.
But it's still cool. You should check it out. And Kirsten did an amazing job. She's got a video on arte di mano. So everything from every half case, every strap, leather option, she's broken it all down and looks amazing. She's done an incredible job. So check out her video on arte di mano, which in our opinion is still the highest quality half cases available for Leica anywhere. And yeah, stay tuned for our next episode on 50mm. We will see you then. Until then,
Have a good night.
see you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks
Bye,
again.
guys.